So last night we had a bit of a chat about our mate Oliver Plunket and his interview with the president of the Victorian University of Wellington Students Association, VUWSA, Marcail Parkinson. And we thought, rather than bombastically shouting down Marcail and giving her 8 seconds at a time to answer a half question and then spinning it at the end to pretend you'd asked a completely different question, maybe we'd just get Marcail on and shut up for a while and find out what this is all about. So let's welcome to the show, Marcail Parkinson. Kia ora.
Thanks for having me.
That's absolutely my pleasure. Did I synopsize your interactions with Oliver fairly well there?
Yeah, I think so. It was, I knew it wasn't going to be an easy interview going in. I, didn't go in expecting to be welcomed with open arms, but I was surprised at how little I got to speak.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, just speaking of that, I've got some stuff I want to ask you about that, but I saw that I think it was the sub-editor for The Salient went on the platform as well. Yeah. We're always interested as to why people choose to go on, even forget that particular platform, when they know they're not going to get a fair shake and they're going to get shouted down. What was your rationale behind going on and even talking to them?
Yeah, so I had quite a few conversations when they reached out to me because I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to go on. Yep. And Henry, who works at Salient, I work quite closely with, and he let me know that he'd also been asked to go on, and we had a couple phone calls. And I had some calls with my family and also the Vice-Chancellor talking about whether it makes sense to engage in a conversation when you know you're not going to be given a fair go. And I watched a bunch of Plunket's videos to kind of prep myself and thought that he had gotten better recently, actually, at interviewing people and had given people more space to speak, having watched his videos with Chris Hipkins, where he did actually let Chris give some of his opinion. And Henry and I have both had quite a lot of hate on Twitter and other social media recently about being snowflakes who can't handle a debate and can't cope with other people's opinions. And so we kind of wanted to go on the platform to directly contradict that and say, actually, we're willing to be accountable for what we've said. We're going to go on a platform on the platform where we know that our views aren't going to be received with open arms, but we're willing to defend what we've said and also listen to what the other side has to say and engage in that conversation.
Well, the unfortunate thing you got wrong there is the listen to what the other side had to say, because you never get a chance to listen. I'll tell you what it is about Chris Hipkins, though. Plunket needs access to Hipkins. It's good for his show to be able to get Hipkins on every couple of weeks. So he needs Hipkins more than Hipkins needs him. And I think that's probably what you heard when you thought he was getting better, so to speak. Let me synopsize your conversation, because I've written that down in steps as I heard it. So you go on, he says, what's wrong? What's wrong with the Free Speech Union? You say they support lots of questionable causes, my paraphrase. He says, like what? You say Julian Batchelor's anti-co-governance. He says, what's wrong with that? You say they made race-based decisions on who was allowed into the meetings. He says, no, they didn't. And in fact, he went so far as to say this.
The co-governance tour that actively turned away Māori from its...
When did it actively turn away Māoris?
There's many news articles, Sean. I'm sure you can look them up.
No, I've covered them extensively. There is lots of examples of them turning away people who were disrupting their meetings. Not one single example ever, Marcail, of them having a race barrier.
Oh, really?
Or
That's not the story.
Yeah, well, there's facts and there's the stories you hear, Marcail.
See, when someone puts out a metric like that, not one single example, that's a measurable fact, Marcail. And so very quickly, you then you told him of one single example, which he couldn't. I don't know if you noticed this when you watched it back. If you watched it back, he couldn't log into his computer. It was like watching an orangutan try and use an iPad. He couldn't figure it out. Not to say that we're better than Sean Plunket, but when I googled the keywords, I got it straight away. The article you were talking about, right? Māori filmmaker refused entry to stop co-governance meeting in Blenheim. So you gave him the example, one single example, because he says there's not one single example. And then he said, but Julian Batchelor isn't speaking in the event at the university or part of the Free Speech Union, which is the bait and switch, because that's not what you were saying. You were saying the Free Speech Union is speaking, and you're concerned because they support causes like Julian Batchelor, not actually Julian Batchelor. So that was the bait and switch. Tell me, did I get that pretty much, nailed down? Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add there is that I had a conversation with the producer beforehand where they wanted me to come on and speak directly with Jonathan Ayling, and I'd said, no, I actually don't want to talk about Jonathan Ayling because I don't want to center the conversation around him. This conversation is about free speech and the meaning of free speech. It's not about an individual. And so I was quite disappointed that, hopefully the producer had told Sean that, and Sean then decided to make the entire interview about Jonathan Ayling and the Free Speech Union when I'd explicitly asked him not to.
Well, of course. I mean, that's better clickbait for him, isn't it? I mean, on reflection now, you did your voice was heard in small incremental bits between blowhardery. Do you think it was worth going on? Would you do it again?
I think it was worth going on. I had students contact me after I went on saying that they'd seen it and it made them really proud that I was the president, and that they really appreciated that I was willing to go on platforms that aren't mainstream media platforms to discuss my views, and platforms that don't agree with me. So I think it was worth it, but I don't know that I would go on again.
I agree. I think you did really well. But when I emailed you yesterday, I think that was the first thing I said in the email. I think you did really well because, I mean, I'm watching the series Fallout at the moment on Prime Video, and there's a thing called a gulper. And the gulper is like this big whale that swims under the water and comes up with a massive mouth and gulps, and it's got fingers inside its mouth to pull the things in. And when I saw that, I went, oh, that's kind of like a Sean Plunket interview. It just gulps everything, all this oxygen in the room. And so, yeah, I think you did really well as well. Let's actually have a look at what the subject matter was about. The subject matter, and I've got an RNZ article up here for people to check out. The subject matter was about free speech versus hate speech. Victoria University postpones debate after student backlash. I won't go through the whole thing, but maybe the first couple of paragraphs. Victoria University has postponed a planned debate on freedom of speech after concerns the event would become a platform for hate speech. Last week, student magazine Salient criticised the lack of diversity of the 5 confirmed panellists, singling out the inclusion of the Free Speech Union's Jonathan Ayling as a consistent supporter of harmful rhetoric. Now, there's a very good line in this, because I read this a couple of paragraphs last night, where one of you said, there it is, probably this one here, the Free Speech Union are looking to defend the issues, the speech, sorry, that the Free Speech Union are looking to defend is consistently speech, this is a great definition, that fits under the United Nations definition of hate speech, and that is the concern we have with the university. Why is it that you feel hate speech is a legitimate discourse that shouldn't be suppressed? Now, just so you know, Marcail, last night we did a bit of a chat about this, and I said, in general, I'm someone who leans towards more speech is better. But I'm all someone who knows there's no such thing as a free speech absolutist. And all we got to do is think about putting a threat towards a politician or stuff, or yelling fire in a theatre. And also on top of all of that, acknowledging that I'm not part of one of these vulnerable groups that may or may not be impacted by certain speech. So I'm always wanting to listen and see what others have got to say, while still in general leaning towards more speech rather than less speech. So tell us about the university situation, what you guys were trying to tell them, and the outcome from it, because I believe there may have been a little bit of exaggeration in some of the articles that we've read. So why don't you tell us your part of it, tell us what was happening, and tell us why you took that position.
Yeah, so the idea behind the free speech debate originally came from an op-ed that the Vice-Chancellor Nick Smith wrote for the Post, which you can look up if you just look up Nick Smith free speech. Which is really interesting, and it's him talking about how the ACT Party's new free speech bill will make speech in universities less free, because of the way that sometimes opening up the doors, kind of like you said, yelling fire in a theatre type of thing. So there you go. The problem with the government's free speech law. So it came out of this, and I think one of the reasons why people like Ayling were invited is that they wrote responses to this article, which was interesting. But yeah, I totally back Nick in this article and the points that he's making here around how, sometimes people think that they're making speech more free, but actually it's restricting often minority groups from being able to put forward their views. And the issue that we kind of brought up when the university put forward the panel, first of all, yeah, there was an issue of diversity. Everyone on the panel was Pākehā. And we were really concerned about that because there had been talk about the panel discussing topics such as te tiriti. And most people who I have spoken to did not feel comfortable with te tiriti being discussed, especially anyone Māori who I spoke to, didn't feel comfortable that te tiriti was going to be discussed without a Māori person there to speak for it. Another issue is that and I've spoken to many Māori staff who had been asked to sit on the panel, and the reason that they had all given for not sitting on the panel was that they didn't feel it was a safe space for them.
Right.
And that was really concerning. These are our academics. These are people who are so well versed in what they do. You know, they're the top of their field. And if they don't feel comfortable sitting on a stage because of the other people's views that are up there, you know, that is preventing their free speech, right? Which is what the Free Speech Union seem to be all about. And then the other issue is what we've covered, which is that the Free Speech Union have consistently promoted and protected speech that promotes hate. So some more examples of that, as well as the Bachelor co-governance things. There was Posey Parker when she came to New Zealand. They have done some articles around things that could be more left-leaning, like the cancellation of Rainbow Storytimes. But even then, they blame the council for cancelling the event because they say that everyone has the right to protest and the council is taking away people's right to protest those Rainbow Storytimes.
Look, the truth is the Rainbow Storytime ones, we covered that quite heavily. When actually Ailing was talking to Plunket, and Ailing wanted to make sure everybody knew he was a Christian, and as a good Christian man, he found the behaviour of the drag queens abhorrent. So like he that was literally, I mean, he might not have used the word abhorrent, but disgusting. We played it on the show. So, you know, he says he's standing with, and look, we've been saying it for a long time. I firmly believe, it's my honest held belief, if they decide to get litigious, it's my honest held belief that they're a right-wing psyop who've thrown a few lefty kind of things every now and again to try and save face, to go, oh no, we talk about everything. Stefan Molyneux is one of the probably worst cases of who they've supported coming across here, which is just, you know, black and white. And even Graham Linehan, I think his name is, who I think on reflection, it's an interesting conversation because some of the things he was complaining about in the UK have now, the laws have switched in the UK. So there's an interesting debate to be had there, but it's certainly not coming from a place of sort of, let's have an authentic academic conversation. It feels like it's more coming from a place of, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, you know, let me punch down sort of thing.
Yeah. The other thing that I found really interesting about the debate is that a lot of people have conflated free speech with academic freedom. They're not quite the same thing. They're similar, and I can see where it comes from, but they're not quite the same thing. And under academic freedom, with the law that is set out by the Ministry of Education for what academic freedom means, it says that universities have an ethical need to protect the right to speak and challenge ideas that are based in evidence, research, and scholarship.
Right.
And we didn't feel that the debate format was going to promote things that were based in evidence, research, and scholarship. We didn't believe that there was enough moderation at the event to ensure that things were based in evidence. And so that's what we've asked the university. And I mean, to their credit, the university have postponed the event so that they can look at reformatting it to include more voices, have more diversity, make sure that it can be moderated correctly so that what is being discussed can be based in evidence, research, and scholarship. And one of the things I found most frustrating is that people like Plunket and Jonathan Ailing seem to believe that the university is caved to the woke crowd because they're afraid of being cancelled, and they want to, the students want to cancel free speech, and the university is afraid of being cancelled, and so they've caved. What's actually happened is, as students, we have used our right to free speech to say, hey, look, we have some concerns about how this event has been organised. The university's gone and said, those are very valid concerns, and so therefore we are going to restructure the event to address that, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Like, I 100% back the uni in doing that, and massive props, because it's really difficult to say, actually, yeah, we've made a mistake and we're going to step back and try and fix it.
How would you respond to the kinds of people that use the term woke? Normally, like 15 years ago, I was working in talkback, and the same people today who are saying woke back then were saying PC. Everything's PC. Now everything's woke. It's the same kind of, and normally what I find is most people who use those terms don't actually understand what they mean. In fact, Plunket himself, I've podcasted with Plunket once before. When I asked him what woke means, he agreed it was anything that didn't agree with him. That was considered woke. But if you were speaking to one of these people who did have that sort of position that everything was woke, and who say things like, "Oh, university is a place you're supposed to go to have your thoughts challenged and have these debates," how would you respond to that?
I mean, for starters, I agree. The university is a place that you go to have your ideas challenged and to expand your worldview. Like, that is 100% university, somewhere where, everyone should be able to express their views, but as long as their views are based in evidence, research, and scholarship. It's not a place to come and just spout whatever random nonsense you've dreamed up. Sean Plunket did say to me yesterday that he believed I was living in, I think he called me the mayor of Wokesville or something, and he said he was living in the real world. I wasn't quite sure how to respond to that when he said it, because I'm not sure who gets to decide what's the real world and what's not.
He does. Hang on, were you not aware of that, Marcail? It's everything. Like, anytime Wellington City Council spends money, Sean Plunket he said on the show before, "I did not approve of this." He has to go through him. Yeah. So you weren't aware of this.
I guess he's the mayor of the real world.
Yeah. So just giving us a new name for him. We've now got a third name for him, the mayor of the real world. We might get those T-shirts made.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that a lot of people who use the term woke to encapsulate things, it's a really weak argument. It doesn't actually say anything. It's just a term that's thrown around to try and shut people down and try and discredit, especially young people. Yeah. And it's really important to recognize that as like a power imbalance, which is something else that, was an issue with the debate, was that we didn't believe that it recognized the power imbalances of those who were going to be talking, or of the students as audience members versus the people on the panel. I think that's a really important thing to consider.
I think when you put the condition, and I'm reading it, I've jotted it down, the condition that the university has about, making sure everything comes as evidence, research, and scholarship, it kind of ends this debate, doesn't it? Like, I mean, the debate isn't that we're having about the debate. The debate about the debate seems to be ended because, that doesn't mean you just get someone up there like what we do in the show, just spouting opinions, because that needs to be based on evidence, research, and scholarship. The other thing about free speech, and I don't know if it's quite the same in New Zealand, but certainly, America seems to be the hub of free speech. It's normally based in and around government agencies. Like, if I just kick you off this platform right now, Marcail, and you go, "Oh, you wouldn't let my free speech." No, that's because you're not entitled to be on this. It's not a free speech issue. It's more about a government entity hindering your speech. And all these guys who, like Jonathan Ailing's a perfect example, were bitching and whining about, my free speech and this and that. And then he goes on to a platform and speaks to more people on a platform about what a victim he is, losing his chance for free speech, while he's literally speaking to people on a bigger platform. I think people think that they talk about free speech, but what they're really wanting is the privilege to do what they want, when they want, and say it how they want. Chewy often talks about, being able to say the N-word. People just want free speech so they can say the N-word, or something ridiculously as abhorrent as that sort of thing.
Yeah, yep, I totally agree. I think there is also a big difference between, the freedom to speak and giving someone a platform to speak. Anyone's able to go onto the internet and keyboard warrior and type out all of their thoughts and feelings. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I, as the VUWSA president, need to repost that.
Yeah, 100%.
Platforming people's views is completely different to freedom of speech, and they're issues that get conflated a lot. So this was an issue where we were concerned that the university was platforming views that we did not think were appropriate to be platformed due to the ethical responsibilities of the university. And that's been turned into you're taking away my freedom to speak.
Yeah. No, fascinating. Hey, look, I want to ask you about one more thing. We've already talking about this because you sent me a text while we were talking today, and I'll read the part of the text out that we're going to talk about. You say this: interesting conversation where David Seymour blamed me for, quote, making defamatory, untrue, and misleading comments, end quote, about the fact that the New Zealand Initiative and Free Speech Union are both funded through the same streams, Atlas Network. So David Seymour, you ran into David Seymour and he accused you of making defamatory and untrue, misleading statements. So I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, so I was at Parliament today for a rally for the Mental Health Matters Initiative, which is a really cool initiative around supporting youth mental health. And the reason we were there today was specifically around the defunding of the Suicide Prevention Office, which is a really important issue, but different topic. And I saw David Seymour walking past, just coming back from his lunch break, I guess. He had some Subway. And so I decided I'd run over to him and say, hey, because I've met David before. He was my local MP when I was in high school. And I met with him multiple times and had some really interesting conversations around the climate and that sort of thing. But I ran up to him and I said, hey, David, I just wanted to know, like, are you free sometime? Like, I tried to ask you on Twitter, but are you free sometime to sit down and have a chat about free speech and what the difference is between free speech and hate speech and why you've been making these comments about me online? And he said, oh, why should I talk to you about free speech? And I said, oh, because I'm the president of VUWSA. And he went, oh. He then, basically went on to tell me that he didn't want to sit down and have a conversation with me because he didn't believe that my comments that I'd made online were appropriate, and specifically pulled out, I think I made quite a throwaway comment when I was on News Talk ZB, where I said, and if you look at the New Zealand Initiative and the Free Speech Union, they're all funded through the same streams. And he kind of went on a bit of a rant at me for about a minute about how that's an untrue statement to make and it's defamatory. And he was like, I want to talk to you about the defamatory statements that you've been making around the funding of the Free Speech Union and the New Zealand Initiative. They're not he just kind of went on a bit of a rage at me, which was not the greatest experience, but at least I talked to him.
Well, as a former graduate of the Atlas Network, it's interesting that he's so sure he knows where Atlas is spending their money. So if he knows it's not going there, then that implies he knows it's probably going to other places. Interesting that a graduate would know that, perhaps, Marcail.
Yeah, I don't know. I found it quite a weird thing for him to have latched onto because it was such a throwaway comment. And I didn't specifically mention the Atlas Network when I said it because I don't know a ton about them. Most of what I know has just been through when he did post about me on Twitter. There were a bunch of people in the replies saying, oh, of course you're defending these people because they're from the Atlas Network. And I was like, oh, and I did some research into it. But yeah, I thought it was a really weird thing for him to latch onto and to have a go at me about, and to say it was defamatory when I believe that there is evidence out there that the Free Speech Union and the New Zealand Initiative have both received funding from the Atlas Network previously. Yeah.
And the interesting question, why he went off at that, I mean, defensive much, methinks the lady doth protesteth too much, perhaps. I mean, if you're going to go off on that one thing, I wonder why that's the trigger point, Marcail. Just speculating out here, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I talked to some people I know and they, I'm friends with some of Salient and things, and they all said that they've seen a lot of him recently getting quite upset about any mention of the Atlas Network. So he just seems to be quite touchy about the subject at the moment.
Right. Hey, we said last night as a bit of a throwaway joke that we felt old when you told us your mum watched the show. That was a reference to us if your mum's watching. It was a reference to how old we are, not how old your mum is. Do you want to shout out to your mum in case she's watching?
Hi, Mum. How are you doing? I think my siblings are watching as well. They were messaging in the family group chat, everyone watch BHN to see Marcail.
So you an Epsom girl? Is that the neighbourhood you're in?
Yeah. I went to Epsom Girls for high school. And I ran the School Strikes for Climate in Auckland, which was why I met with David quite a few times.
Nice. All right. Yeah. Very cool. Hey, I guess the last thing, just on a personal level, are you going to be one of these horrible wokesters who never has a real job and goes straight from the president into parliament, then into government? What's your plan for the future?
I don't want to go straight into parliament. I'm not going to completely write it off as an option because there might be a point in the future when I do decide to. But I think I've had enough in the public light in the past few years. It's taken quite a toll. There's a lot of really, really ugly stuff that goes on in the media, especially as a woman. I get quite a lot of hate on social media and on Twitter and those sort of places. And yeah, it's taken a bit of a toll on me emotionally. So I'm going to go and do some work that I find a bit more fulfilling than doing this kind of media. So I'm looking at working with either refugees or homeless people are kind of my two passions. So yeah, I'm studying a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Art History. So hopefully I can use that and yeah.
Can you see your screen right now? Is this the people?
Yeah, that's my mum.
Hi, Mum. Nice to be. Everyone's saying hi to your mum now. Look, see, hi, Mum.
It's so cute.
Hi, Mum. And of course, everyone's also saying thanks, Marcail. Great chat. Family should be very proud. I agree with that as well. So thanks for coming on. You've got a little community here who are sending their love. So thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you trusting another internet news media site that don't shout that much. We tend to shout when we're shouting at people like Sean Plunket, but not to our guests. So that's nice. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, mate. You're a legend. Really appreciate you having on. And I'll send you some videos about the Atlas Network. We've had a few interesting conversations here about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, dude. All the best. Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo.